Thought Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, how are you today? I hope that you, like me, are having a fabulous day, getting things done with a little relaxation and a lot of spiritual grounding. Or maybe you're coming here to be a part of poetry, prayer, and practice for your spiritual grounding. And if that is so, welcome. Welcome. Just in case there's someone watching for the very first time, I encourage you to drop a note in the chat or the comments and let us know where you're watching from. This is a show that focuses on three things, as you would guess by the title. We talk about poetry and how that can be a spiritual practice or ground us in spiritual principle. We talk about prayer and dive into how can prayer be a core part of our spiritual practice. How does it work? How can we make it work better? How can we use it to benefit our lives or to manifest what we desire? Poetry, prayer, and practice. So there are all kinds of spiritual practices. And if you're a fan of New Thought Media Network, you know every morning at 7 a.m. During the week, there is a different spiritual practice. There are spiritual practices talked about on many of the shows. And so for poetry, prayer, and practice, we tend to look at and feature those practices that maybe don't get talked about as much, or taking basic practices and tweaking them or using them in a slightly different way. So that's why we have poetry, prayer, and practice on Tuesdays at noon Mountain Time. My name is Tracy Brown. I am based in Dallas, and I literally love the fact that we have people from everywhere who participate in this show. So we've got Wayne, and we've got Fiona, and we have a few others of you who are watching live, but you haven't put in the chat, and that's okay. You're not required to, but if you'd like to, I'd love to say hello to you and welcome you to the show. Does it seem to you like every week, Tracy says, I've been looking forward to this conversation for months? She says it because it's true, and today is no exception. I get an opportunity to catch up with someone I haven't talked to in a while, and you get to eavesdrop on that conversation. Side note, again, for people who are not regular viewers of the show, these are not scripted. They're not presentations. Really, I just have a conversation with my guest, and who knows where we're going to go. That's especially true today. It's true every week, but especially today because my guest is Sonia Byrne. And as I usually do, I'm going to share three random things that I know about Sonia Byrne, and then I'll bring her on and she can tell you other things about her background and about her passions that she would like for you to know. So three things about Sonia Byrne. Number one, Sonia Byrne is a Canadian. And even though I had been around other Canadians and other people from the UK, it is Sonia Byrne who got me saying process instead of process, easily and effortlessly. So Sonia Byrne is a Canadian. However, number two, Sonia Byrne currently lives in Mexico. And number three, if you were to combine leadership, coaching, business acumen, spirituality, universal spiritual principles, and mindful living, and you were mixing them up in a bowl, that recipe would produce Sonia Byrne. And so a lot of what we'll talk about today is how she has found it possible to integrate spiritual principle, strategic planning, excellent leadership, and mindfulness, and taking our spiritual beliefs and practices into the business community. So that last third thing was a little long, but those are three random things about Sonia Byrne. And so hey, how are you?
Hey there. I'm a testament to the fact that you're alive and unscripted today, I think.
Yes, yes, yes. Alive, live, and unscripted. And that's partially because it keeps it interesting for me that we didn't have a pre-meeting and then say, here are the four things we're going to talk about. And it forces both of us to be fully present. And I am fully present with the boom, boom, boom in the background.
Yes.
So what is that?
So I am in Ajijic, Mexico, just outside Guadalajara, and they are having a 9-day festival. It's a San Andreas festival, but it's a Fiesta de Patronoles. So it actually, each day is dedicated to a different group of people inside of the community that make the community. So today is dedicated to construction workers and the beautiful work they do. We've had a day dedicated to youth associations, to artists, to gardeners, and people who beautify the environment. And it involves church services, mariachi bands, and fireworks. So we're hearing a little bit of that in the background right now. You can be living vicariously in the center of Mexico right now with me.
Yes, I am participating in the festival. See, every one of us can say we went to Mexico and participated in the festival, a 9-day festival. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And fireworks in the middle of the day, because it's the middle of the day in this part of the world.
And at 5:30 to let us know that the church service is starting soon. And in the evening, yeah, and after midnight. It's just very festive, and it's wonderful to be a part of. And it's 9 days.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that, because when you were saying, like, construction workers, I'm thinking, oh, they're celebrating construction workers today and they're pounding on walls everywhere. But it's fireworks, Tracy.
Fireworks, food, music, all the good things.
Yes, just no sleep allowed for 9 days.
And it does stop shortly.
So I shared three random things, and of course that third one was a little long, but it is the thing that fascinates me most about you, that you embody this unusual mix of really understanding business, being a strategic thinker, and then you bring in spiritual practice and mindfulness. So that's a very unique combination. So I share that. But what else? Is there anything else that you want to share with people so they get a sense of who is Sonia Byrne?
Well, I do a lot of work organizationally. Probably around 70% of my work is organizational, but there is a greater need in the world for people who are employees or not employees, entrepreneurs, retired people, etc., to still feel that they can operate in their life in an organized way that is backed by spirituality. And I think that's really important for people, no matter if they're an employee or not.
Yes, and you both model that as well as teach it. So that's pretty amazing. Amazing, amazing. I am curious. Okay, I know that, like, oh no, what is she going to ask me? I'm just curious about your living in Mexico, but the people you work with are not all or only in Mexico. So talk a little bit about that, because you are probably the person I know best who truly lives an international life.
Well, I spend my time between Mexico and Canada, and my clients are all over the world. I've been choosing Mexico as a place to live, but actually not to do much in the way of work. So it's sort of the center, my center, for my centeredness, and everything goes out from there. The majority of my clients are still Canadian, though I do some work in the Middle East, and sometimes I'm called to do some work in North and South America, a little bit in Europe. But the concepts and the challenges are exactly the same. And you mentioned this intersection. I always do this hand gesture of spirituality and business, and people often think that they're very different experiences. And in my time doing this work, I've had the spiritual people be somewhat judgmental about the business stuff that I bring up. How dare you bring up business or money or process or operations? And then I've had the business people say, I feel like I'm in therapy. This is really soft stuff. So it's been an interesting path to follow in my life and to live. I can say that because every day I live, I'm living longer. I've been doing this for just about 3 decades now, this work in leadership, mostly with nowadays nonprofit organizations. About 80% of my business is nonprofit leadership and their board. And so when I'm doing that work, that intersection is very present, and it's become what I have become known for. And so it's interesting to see who approaches me to do work with them. I'm able to rest in a place of curiosity. And I think, 15, 20, 25 years ago, doing work in businesses that had a spiritual bent, and I don't even use the word spiritual, mindful has been a great word, conscious has been a great word, that's been developed over the past 10, 15 years to make the spiritual centeredness that is necessary to make good decisions in organizations, is made it palatable, it's made it more welcome. So I'm actually not as strange as I used to be in business.
I totally get that. And you just reminded me of a conversation I was very recently in, where someone pretty much said that, like, spirituality and politics are two completely different things and should not, like, you can't talk about them in the same sentence. And as you said, that people in the business world often in the past would separate themselves from spirituality, and people in the spiritual world would separate themselves from business. But what is it that we teach, right? That there's only one. And so whether it's in business or whether it's in politics or whether it's in society in general, it's all about humanity expressing itself and learning to do that collectively towards some goal. And in that sense, it's all spiritual, but how do we frame that? So when you get pushback, and you get less pushback now. I mean, I heard you just say that. People seek you out because of that now. But when you do get pushback, or in the past when you did, how did you learn to reconcile that? And I'm really asking this for the audience, right? People who might be in work situations or entrepreneurial situations now where they want to bring their spirituality more in focus, but feel like that won't be accepted. So, how did you reconcile that, or how do you respond when people are a little uncomfortable with those two mixing?
Mm. Well, in the business world, uh, great concepts of values like intention and purpose and collaboration, integrity, transparency. Organizations are much more comfortable with the idea that a value set is important. And it becomes, when I do strategic planning, the first thing we do is mission, vision, and values. And I will have people say, can we get on with the action stuff? Like, what are we going to do? But if you don't do your mission, vision, and values and figure out what your purpose is and what you're really there to do as an organization, whether you're a corporate organization or a nonprofit group or association, if you don't figure that out, then you really lose the foundational platform. So if the foundational platform can be built, then when you get into difficult conversations or arguments or a level of discord, immediately, soon, or 2 or 3 or 5 years later, you can always go back and filter that conversation through that value set, the mission and vision and the values. And so the boards end up in conversations, in the future that sound like, well, does this activity support our mission? Does it help express our values? Does it get us closer to our vision? So using those sorts of these are not get out of jail free cards. Like you can't bypass those conversations. So that causes people to stop. It's disarming, but in a positive way. I find in more spiritual settings when I start to talk about money or operational activity or setting lines or rules or guidance, and sometimes that feels unpalatable. I use the concept of doing good and doing well. So we can focus on doing good in the world and not be concerned about money or how things get organized. But if we want to do well, then we can do more good. And by doing well requires generally people knowing what's expected of them and people collaborating. And that apart from the P of people, that other P's like process and policy and practice, etc., are in place to make it easy for that group or future generations of board members to be able to keep everything moving so that you can do well. And in doing well, all of the wellness, the outputs of the wellness, whether they be tangible, fiscal, or otherwise, can get folded into the good. And when people can connect into that idea, they relax a little more around a conversation that's about money or numbers or plans. And this has been my experience.
Yeah, my experience as well. And as I'm listening to you, I'm just reminded of how these two things that we often want to separate, business and spirituality, how it almost always causes more trouble if we don't find some ways. And I agree with you that I know for me, one of the things I realized decades ago when I was still in corporate America was that for me, the company values did feel like I was bringing forth, or I would be required to bring forth my spiritual grounding in order to execute or embody those values, even though it was never talked about. And as you know, I do a lot of work in the world around diversity, valuing diversity, and creating inclusive environments. And I have said from the moment I started my business that for me, it is about helping people get in touch with whatever they learned in terms of the golden rule or how you should treat people, like bringing that forward without preaching to them, so that my spiritual motivation might be invisible, because I'm all about creating the spiritual principle of harmony in practice in the world, or the spiritual principle of love, or definitely the spiritual principle of unity. That's why I do the work that I do. But I knew it needed to be invisible in the business world for many business people, but tangible. So, like, I wouldn't quote a biblical scripture or a quote from the Quran or from the Torah, but I would often get people in the room saying, "Oh, but when I was growing up, I was taught to be respectful in this way." And I'm like, okay, it's working. I don't have to say God. I don't have to say Jesus. I don't have to say Buddha. And I can bring them to that point where they are speaking from their place of spiritual groundedness.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of separation of supposed good ideas or good emotions, and then bad or negative emotions. And I saw a great depiction of it a few days ago, where it was a linear depiction, and it was this information around fake spirituality, and it was this separation on a linear path of like these elevated emotional experiences, like ascension, love, joy, and then there was a space, and there was like an underground or below on the hierarchy these other emotions, like anger, mistrust, fear, etc. And the storyline in this depiction was the repression of or denying of emotional experiences. And so when we get into, in this experience of oneness that we're in, when we get into labeling one set of emotions or one set of processes as bad and another as good, then we're really in our own triggers. We're really in what's about us, and we're really speaking from our own background and our own woundedness, and we're putting it all on display for everybody to see. We think that we are such human beings think that we're such mysteries. We're not at all. If you want to know everything about somebody, just watch their expressions, just listen to their words, just watch their actions, and they tell you everything about who they are. And so this dichotomy of separating, business or money, and then what is the good emotion? So is poverty good? Is that valiant in some way? That hair shirt, wearing the hair shirt, and being agitated. I think you and I have had this conversation before around crisis is a very unifying experience, but it's exhausting. And when things are moving along quite easily in a business, people are spiritually centered or mindfully or consciously centered. There's good collaboration. People are acting without agenda. Then you can a lot of flow can happen. A lot of good can happen. Things move easily, quickly, fast. Things grow and develop. But having any sense of shame or this dichotomy or consciousness shaming creates more of like a snakes and ladders type of experience, where you go up a little bit and down and up a little. And so it's often boards or organizational teams that reach out to me and say, we've been in this, what I call snakes and ladders, for quite some time. Can you help us level that off? And something like mission, vision, values is a very leveling experience, because it gives them something outside of the personal agenda or personal conversation as the reference point. It's non-subjective, except it was created subjectively to represent that organization. But it's something that you can dip into as a filter to help reconcile that dichotomy of sort of triggered emotional expressions, which is really the repression of some things that we've labeled bad. But we have to remember that not everybody's labeled bad the same things that we've labeled bad. But if we hang out with enough people who think exactly like us, we can feel very right.
So true. And so you just said a whole lot of things that my brain is wanting to respond to, because surely we have had enough, more than our fair share in the global world of crisis, right? And rallying behind crisis, and I'm right and you're wrong, and this is the only answer, right? And if you have a different idea or a different view, you're like, no, right? You just get erased or discounted or minimized or ignored. And it's so fascinating to me how ardently people will, the human person, but people will argue for their limitations, right? They will be like, well, this is the problem, and that's why we can't do anything about it. And I'm just gonna go into my shell. And that always, it's not even that it frustrates me, although it does, it confounds me how, especially people who are trained and grounded in new thought spirituality, it confounds me how common it is for people to either become the victim on the drama triangle or to totally ignore what's going on as if it doesn't exist. Someone said to me a few weeks ago that they just refused to watch the news about what was going on at the time in is between Israel and the Hamas. And I asked a couple of questions, and I don't know very much. I mean, I had been saying right around that same time, I need to go do my homework because I don't know enough of the history to really have an opinion about or a suggestion. And I had said that maybe, the day before, and then I was in this conversation and the person was like, well, no, I don't know what happened, or I don't know why this group is not happy with this group, but I don't need to know. Like, I don't need to know. I just know I'm not going to watch the news. I'm like, how do we we're, in science of mind especially, but also in unity teachings, it is all about changing condition, not ignoring condition, but changing condition. And so it confounds me how those of us who are spiritually grounded and guided can turn our backs or pretend that it doesn't affect us, or that there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just one person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to stop because I feel myself getting ready to get on a soapbox.
There's a lot of issues that are quite contentious right now, and coming out of this pandemic experience, and people feeling somewhat raw, and still feeling the tinge of that experience. And I've witnessed people looking around and seeing the traumatic experience that happened, and sometimes making that their experience. So not just that we've witnessed the world going through a very traumatic experience, but I have been traumatized, and we've all been through a lot of things. And what I think is interesting to note from a more of a Western privileged perspective is that there's places in the world that is their reality, and it's been their reality every day of their life. And we've been very upset by it. And not to deny anybody their their right to experience what they're experiencing and feeling what they're feeling. And I think devoid of perspective and a global view, that can be a very unhappy experience for people for a very long time. It may mark their life for their life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think any one of us individually has the answer, but I do know that there is no answer in ignoring, and there is no answer in having separation at that level. Because the folks who are engaged will drive the momentum of what happens in our human experience. And so if those of us who could bring love or joy or peace or is something not so much soft, because love to me is demanding. Love to me, if I love humanity and want humanity's experience to replicate heaven on earth, that may mean I have to say some hard things, or I may have to be in some very difficult conversations because I love humanity and what our potential is. So this idea that being loving or being kind or being peaceful means that we don't speak up, or that we don't offer alternatives, or that we don't ask hard questions of ourselves and others, then that to me is maybe malpractice or negligence, or at the very minimum, a misuse of what we know to be spiritual law and principle. But then, of course, I'm the one who asks hard questions, and and people get uncomfortable with that. So, obviously my perspective about asking the questions that get to the heart of things so that we can do well as do good. I guess I am revealing that's why I do it. And I do understand that for some people that feels very threatening and attacking. But we've got to, if we want change in our individual lives, if we want change in our collective lives, we have to do the work.
Change has not happened from comfort. Comfort and change don't often live together. They're not neighbors, And I'm always interested to hear people talk about peace, and I view peace as a very active experience, and I feel like I'm surrounded by people who view it as a passive experience. So I have to be careful when I talk about something like peace, because I have to be ready to either upset somebody or to defend a position or to have a conversation that changes my ideas or the other person's ideas. Peace is a very, very active experience. And so the idea that peace is something that we feel and then recede, and I'm just going to quietly pray for peace in the world, if we don't understand what's going on behind what we see in the world, we don't take the time to research and educate and inform ourselves, then we might be praying for or focusing on something that we really don't understand. And being a human being has a certain amount of responsibility with it. We're on this planet in this iteration for this period of time, depending on what your belief system is around all of that. And we're not here to ostrich and hide out and not make a difference, because every person makes a difference. But when we talk about peace, there is this polarization, I think, that happens. And I think people just don't know where to go with it, because the idea of peace, and when we talk about leadership, it's all about leadership and communication on a national and international, on a global level. War is just communication. We might think it's not good communication. So someone's been upset. And this is what has happened. But if you break it down, if you can get past like the amygdala hijacking of it all, and you can get to the place of really looking at the logic of it all, then we have some communication that needs to happen, some listening that needs to happen, some mediation that needs to happen. And then you put culture and religion and preferences and socialization on top of that. And it is not as simple as someone might want to be it to be, when they just say, I want peace, and I'm just going to just quietly, from my privileged place in the world, ask for peace or hold out peace. Peace is a really interesting concept, kind of like equality or like financial evenness in the world. It's a very dynamic expression, and we think that if we stay in one place on the planet, that we all believe the same kind of things together. But morals are very geographic, and so what
Yeah.
people think peace looks like is very different. We could have peace, but say we all think we're here, and so peace means this or better. What if we could have peace, but it meant we had to lower our expectations or not have some of the things we have, but we get peace? If peace was the priority, if financial equality was the priority, right? There's this concept of the quantum financial system. It's being discussed in the world, and having a background in finance, I get really curious about that. When I ask questions, it's supposed to create some peace and equity and equality for people on a global level. But if you ask inconvenient questions, the argument starts to fall apart. And mostly I just go quiet unless I'm willing to really dig in.
Yeah, and finding, choosing, like, when do I dig in deeper, and when do I, put an idea out there, float it, and if no one is picking up on it, when do I need to be okay with that? And it's a dance. It's a dance that we're constantly doing. You just reminded me of the models that are used within Centers for Spiritual Living during ministerial training in the diversity and inclusion course for ministerial students, and the cycle of socialization and the cycle of liberation. And I'm like, those models are so fabulous, because they really do help us see how we get caught up in the social norms of whatever culture or community we're a part of, whether that's our family as a culture, our town, or our neighborhood, the church that we attend, or the denomination that we're a part of. That at every level we are operating within a cycle of socialization, how we have been socialized. And all of us are socialized by dozens of communities. And so it's complex when we're just thinking about our individual lives. And then, as you said, when we're looking at global issues, I don't know all the details of the culture and the norms and what is acceptable and what is not, what would be described as peace and what would be described as chaos. There's so many different levels that it is amazing to me that we get anything done, any communication, and definitely any leadership happening in any way. So, I just noticed the time, and it's scary to me how fast the time goes when I'm talking to somebody and we just get started and get going. I do want us to spend a few minutes on what you're doing with clients. In terms of this integrating the spiritual grounding into being an effective leader or business owner. And so one of the things I've noticed, watching from a distance on Facebook, you've been doing these series. You've done a few of them this year where you are giving, tips or ideas or inspiration. So just talk a little bit about maybe a couple of the ones you've done and how people have responded. And then I don't know if you have something coming up that we could be looking forward to.
Absolutely. I do like to do maybe three series a year, and they're based on 21 days. That's a good number for people. They can commit to that. And so some of the series that I do is just simply posts. It's just simply doing social media posts that brighten people's day. The recent 21 days of gratitude, which I usually try to do something in the fall around gratitude between the Canadian and American Thanksgiving. And people really give great feedback on that particular series. So I think I'll probably consider doing that every year. I also do some promotion for programs that I do that have a consciousness with them that are specifically for people in people management and leadership. I have the Lighthearted Leadership Experience, which is 10 tips from Santa's Workshop, the most successful business on the planet. Santa's Workshop is chugging all year round. And so
Okay, wait,
yes,
stop. Wait, did you say Santa?
Santa's Workshop, yeah. That's
Okay, so just say that again because
yeah. Yeah. So usually around this time of year, I'll let people know that I have these 10 workshops that are based on the 10 tips from Santa's Workshop. And it's about having a successful business or successful team. And they're really cute. So I usually will do them this time of year. Sometimes July, I'll put them out. And they're 10 independent workshops, though they can be grouped together. And they're based on fun things like share the milk and cookies, choose your reindeer wisely, make a list and check it twice. So it's these fun sentiments that if you have followed Christmas or Santa's Workshop or this North Pole concept in your world, wherever you are on the planet, that this is a cute way of doing management training. So there's a lot of great spiritual principle in those because they're grounded in being a good leader, being a good manager, contributing and collaborating with your team. So that's sort of on the more businessy side. I love to be able to connect with people on Facebook and Instagram. They're more the audience that is looking for things outside of their workplace. LinkedIn is very, very businessy. But everyone who is an employee or a board leader, etc., is also a human being with a life, a personal life. So I have been called more and more to provide things that are for individuals and outside of business. So I do have something coming up that starts January 8th, but can be used at any time of year, but it launches January 8th. And it's called Coffee and Contemplation. It's a 21-day experience of caffeine inspiration delivered into your inbox. So it'll be some fun but meaningful practices, journal prompts, affirmations, meditation, some wonderful visuals, all around something you can do just simply with your coffee in the morning. anyone who knows me knows I'm a big fan of coffee. I am a coffee lover. And so having a coffee can just be having a coffee. But having a coffee can be an opportunity for stillness, for oneness with the world, for contemplation on the meaning of life or the meaning of your day or the meaning of the conversation that just happened. So we're having some fun putting this together. It's coffee and contemplation and 21-day experience, and people can register right now on my website on soniabyrne.com.
Yes, so that gives me an excuse to encourage people. If you want to stay in touch with or know what's going on with Sonia Byrne as she works with all of us and the world around integration of our spiritual values and our spiritual beliefs, please visit soniabyrne.com, sign up for her newsletter, be on her mailing list, and I promise you won't be disappointed. So our time is pretty much running out. Is there anything that when you thought about, because I didn't ask you, like, why did you say yes to my invitation? And was there something you wanted to share that was related to poetry, prayer, and practice? So I don't want to end. You may have been sitting here this whole time with, oh, how am I going to work that in? Or I really want to say this about prayer or whatever. So I'm going to invite you if there's anything else you wanted to say or just some closing comments.
Well, we have a very loud background. So,
and the fireworks started right at the perfect moment.
Absolutely. When you invited me to something called Poetry, Prayer, and Practice. So I've actually written poetry and had it published. So poetry, prayer, prayer happens in all kinds of ways, in all kinds of places in the world. And so whatever way we're doing it, I think we just keep doing it. We need more. Practice makes all of that real. So if we're keeping everything to ourselves and not sharing our goodness, then we're not in the practice of collaborating with humanity. We're not doing our full work as a human. So when I put all of the spiritual practices together that I have learned, I just now call them stillness, the ability to have a conversation that makes sense amid fireworks in the background requires some practice of stillness and non-distraction. So I'm able to do this, but stillness happens in my spiritual practice when I'm doing the dishes, walking. Sometimes I'll stop and just people watch. People watch is a beautiful spiritual practice. You have a chance to look at everybody and send them from your heart something that you think they need that day, and whether they know that you're doing it or think that they need it, it's still something that's being directed at them. And know that because energy is everywhere and all-knowing in everything, that is landing in just the way that it should.
Thank you so much. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for jumping into a conversation that neither one of us knew what direction it was going to take. And so thank you for trusting me in that way. And thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. I just know how valuable it is and how challenging it is at the same time. And that you just stay focused on bringing that integration into places where many people would avoid even bringing it up. So I appreciate you. I love you. And I'm grateful for you.
Thank you.
Everybody, I just want to encourage you to stay tuned over the next few weeks for some of the folks coming up. In the month of December, we're going to be doing some replays or having people who have been on the show before to come back and spend a little year-end reflection time with us. So in December, you can look for, oh my gosh, you have no idea how many people emailed me or posted on Facebook saying, Sunshine Michelle Coleman gave us so many tips. I couldn't keep track of them all. So we're going to do a replay of that. And Reverend Jeffrey Ryan, who was with us a few weeks ago, is going to come back, and we're going to talk specifically about inclusion as a spiritual practice. I'm going to do a piece on the third week in December around rebirthing Christ consciousness and how that relates to Christmas and many of the other holidays that we celebrate in December. And then Reverend Rafe Ellis will join me for the last show of the year. And as some of you may remember, he was one of my guests on the very first show of the year. So we'll be reflecting on 2023 before we release it and step into 2024. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so delighted that you are finding poetry, prayer, and practice worthy of you investing a little less than an hour of your week. And I want to encourage you that you can always find past shows in the archives at New Thought Media Network on YouTube. And there's a playlist there. Please go back and catch some of the shows that you may have missed. But that is all the time we have for today. So have a fabulous rest of the week, and I'll see you again soon.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week, or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/newthoughtmedianetwork. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.